Hello, welcome to today's broadcast. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're all well. And I'm using StreamYard at the moment to broadcast via Periscope because I need to grow my love for haps. But in the meantime, look at this footage. I'll make it larger so you can all see. But it's a line of men clad in military-looking gear. So it says, a long, disciplined line of men in body armor moves as a unit up the Capitol building steps. We need to identify these men. So that's a zoom. And there's men, sorry for laughing, my husband's playing a video game and sounds like he's frustrated. There's one line of men with their arms on each other's shoulder, and they're following each other in a line up the hill. Yes, hello, Alan. A second police officer has died, but he is not believed to have died from his injuries. It's being suggested he's died from suicide, which is still obviously a concern, but not directly attributable to the actions of the rioters themselves. And of course, so this account is J.S. Railton. He's a man who is working hard to identify the people who jeopardized the lives of police officers, jeopardized the lives of American legislators, and jeopardized the stability of American democracy, who sought to capture and execute legislators in order to force a surrender of American democracy to Donald Trump. They would have symbolically burned the Electoral College ballots, because I hear there are copies of them, but they would have burned them, potentially executed Vice President Pence to punish him for his failure to deliver, using imaginary powers, to deliver an election victory to Trump. Trump was certainly tweeting out whilst the rioters, the insurrectionists, were in the Capitol building. He was tweeting out that Mike Pence had not done the right thing. And many of these people believe that they are fighting for their lives to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. They have talked themselves into a point where they think they're fighting communism and a communist overthrow of the American government. And this is the point where I introduce a term called confabulation. And it's when your lying is done with such emotional need, with such an inability to engage cognitively with truth or evidence, that you can come across as so fervent that you believe yourself. And Donald Trump always does that about things he says himself. But I think in a way it's a product of magical thinking that was written into a book called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And it's sort of like a say it, live it, achieve it approach. Only for Donald Trump, he just has to keep saying that he's won the election. And to me, for all the people who say, I hear the sincerity in his voice, he clearly believes it, he prepares to steal it. He encourages people to overturn the election results because he knows the results are not in his favor. But the only way he can conscript an army that he thinks will be big enough to do his bidding is if he keeps pushing the big lie. So I haven't read it yet. Oh, Sheldon is pointing out that Clarence Thomas can run, but he can't hide. Oh, you're talking about Trump. But also says Ari Thomas, his ass is planted in the Supreme Court until death. Well, some people have concerns because his wife apparently funded 70 buses to go to the Capitol. So she was paying for fancy looking Trump Save America buses to go to the Capitol, or to go to the to go to the outside the White House, and then they walk down to the Capitol by themselves. Hi, Cosmic Rose. Hey, Brian. I haven't seen the video of the first cop being dragged out from the line of officers trying to hold the fort, as it were, hold the door of the Capitol building. I've just seen screenshots of that video, because again, there are accounts on Twitter who are zooming in, movie style, where they say enlarge it, and trying to find details, identifying details of the people who participated in murdering that police officer. So the word on the street, little ninja Buddha, I remember my troll, is that the more the public gets exposed to the videos of what happened in the Capitol building and what happened just outside the Capitol building as people dragged and beat a police officer to death, public opinion is coalescing more strongly against the riot, the insurrection. So my husband follows a lot of conservative accounts on Twitter for their financial opinions, etc. And he also likes reporting to me on what they're thinking and doing. And the thinking was that they were originally responding to the more frivolous footage coming out of the Capitol, as if, okay, well, those were some protesters who got carried away, thought they were in their own Die Hard movie, but just pounced around taking photographs and engaging in petty theft. And then the more that's come out, the video of Ashley Babbitt being shot as she crawled through a broken glass window or broken window, etc., is helping to change their mind. So probably that video of a police officer being brutalized and murdered, and the other police officer, I think possibly in the basement area, who was crushed between the mob and a door and a barricade, and his cries, his screams in pain, are quite agonizing screams in pain, in contrast to the crowd simultaneously just shouting heave ho, and pushing forward. I don't believe that officer has died, but we definitely suffered watching him and his agony. And it does help you remember to be sympathetic with some Capitol police officers, some of whom exhibited great heroism and bravery and were clearly let down by their leadership. And even as we know that there were possibly some others who were cooperating with the people who were conducting the insurrection coup attempt. Greetings, Jeff. All right, so maybe I should check on Twitter for that video. I don't know if I want to share that video, though. It might be too distressing for us. What do we think? Should I have a look? Oh, I know what account. I think it's a Yahoo video, actually. Okay, well, what I do have is the video of the officer, not Brian Seidnick, who died, but a different officer who's going to be on leave for a while. Oh. Okay. Oh, Perry Pilot's given me something to Google. Yeah, I don't think I'll show that other video, but this is the video of those, the mob in the basement. So I'll turn the sound down. Sorry. So he was in a lot of pain, and it's hard. We do need to be in a lot of we do need maximum vigilance for the next 10 days, because I've become more convinced that when Trump tweeted, I think it might have been his last official tweet from his real Donald Trump account, where he said, for the people that have been asking, I won't attend the inauguration event. So I'm now leaning towards the opinion that that was an incitement to violence, because it was permission for people to try and bomb the inauguration event. Like, oh, I won't be there, so don't worry, I'll be safe. You can bring out whatever Molotov cocktails or incendiary or explosive devices you like. So yes, and we've seen posters that they're making already for violence on the 17th of January, as well as the 19th. Yes, Trump lost. Are you asking me to cry about it? Because I'm not going to cry about it. A city wouldn't allow Trump residential at resort, and he was said to be shopping for a place. All right. Oh, Boston Tea Party. We don't count what you like, darling, because you're still in a little bubble of opinions and sentiments that are very divergent from what decent people are feeling. But at the same time, maybe I could get through to you by showing you that, yes, the mob beat up a police officer. I don't know. Tell me more things about why you would like to see that video and what your motivation is, and I'll consider your request. Yes, the inauguration, there's lots of considerations. I can see people want to showcase American democracy and say, yes, we're fine. If they do have it in a public place, I think I'll be too scared to watch it. Yes, safety is of predominant importance. Thank you. Happy Sunday, Mr. Ed. Nice to see you. From the Times article that a lot of people will be talking about. Actually, I think I have a tiny little extract that I saved. But the first sentence was, post-truth is pre-fascism, which means when you accept that your society doesn't care about truth anymore, that's a precondition for the rise of fascism, because you can't hold your government accountable. They can bring people on board with anything. Okay, this is what Timothy Schneider says. He's an important writer on fascism. I've got his little book on tyranny. He writes, post-truth is pre-fascism, and Trump has been our post-truth president. When we give up on truth, we concede power to those with the wealth and charisma to create spectacle in its place. And I would add self-serving spectacle, because I also heard Michael Cohen say on a podcast that once Trump is out of office, there will be more space for people to dig through any records that they haven't managed to destroy. And as a president, subject to the Presidential Records Act, there will be people who've kept records and that haven't wanted to go to jail and haven't destroyed them. So there will be more evidence put into the public arena then that Trump was not ever the president of the United States. He was for the American people. He was only ever acting president in a self-serving capacity. So he was in the position of power, but he acted in his business interests, and so did Jared Kushner, acted to advance their own business interests and not to advance the interests of the American people. This is true. perhaps more people are now open to the opinion, having seen what Trump will give permission for people to do to the Capitol building and to American democracy. They might be more willing to believe that, as well as encouraging people to enter the Capitol without consent, that Trump would also have complete callous disregard for the protestations of a 13-year-old girl who was allegedly raped by Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at Jeffrey Epstein's house. America second, selfishness first. Andrea is hopeful that Trump is headed towards jail time. There certainly are a lot of grounds to prosecute Trump, and from states as well. And state crimes are not subject to pardons in the same way that federal crimes are. Well, we don't feel a strong degree of compunction to have smiling puppies and roses dialogue with people who have been pushing death and devastation on the United States. And we're not deludedly making up some oppressive threat from communism. We're not overinflating women's reproductive choices with some kind of Holocaust and pretending that so and so many millions of babies are killed each year by women who believe in reproductive choice. Lots of Christian women have abortions, just as many. They're just more likely to pretend that their circumstances are unique and don't apply to anybody else. And that's why when they have to make a very difficult personal choice, they're special and should be allowed to have an abortion. They merit an exemption. They can get their doctors to somehow find them a path to get an abortion if that's what they feel they need. And just everybody else are terrible sluts. Because we're talking about Christians who have reinforced very strong neural pathways in their brain to habituated behaviors of judging other people. Who is like Bob, feeling more anger every day? Well, Bob, I've been angry for a long time, so I'm enjoying a change of pace. I felt angry, but also tried to feel determined and tap into that energy and to use whatever I could use with a little distance from America to bring hope and resolve to the table for conversation. So I know what they've done is terrible, but I've been anticipating this level of terrible for years. So what I feel is more vindicated. And I tell my husband that, hey, maybe you could be more proud of your wife, or tell your children to be proud of your wife so they don't just tease me for not earning as much money as daddy. And, at least I think he respects a lot more now that I wasn't kidding about the fascism. It really is a big problem. America has really nurtured a fascist viper in their bosom for a long time. Millions of people in the United States are heavily propagandized. So with statistics at the moment, it's apparently the case that 67% of Americans think Donald Trump should be removed from office. And that's 93% of all Democrats, 75% of independents. And it was either, what's left? I think it was about 13% of Republicans who believed that as well, which is relatively small and shows you not just that Republicans happen to think a certain way. Republicans are exposed to certain media bubbles and are more likely to stick to those bubbles rather than expose themselves to a variety of media diets. If they come across another opinion, this is what they do. Bye. That's what they say, or they say rude things. You won, move on, do something good, something. Oh, that person's trying to spell head and it's come out as heed for you. Poor darling. I still think it's promising that you can acknowledge that Joe Biden won. That's healthy, because it is difficult and for people to celebrate the violence and the fear caused by the attack on the Capitol and say, oh, look, we caused people to be afraid. Let's do that some more. Let's attack and kill more people. So it's great that Parler's been shut down, because there was certainly a lot of violent planning being being done on Parler, and lots of we'll teach those lib communists blah blah insult a lesson. I saw a comment from Parler that said what you have to do to deter communists is skin all their relatives in front of them, cousins, nephews, nieces, wives last, and that's when they'll understand it's not a good idea to be a communist. So I'm familiar with the idea of fascists using the fear of communism to hype people up into a state of irrational frenzy. But it's still always startling to come across such an unrepentantly violent exhortation. Yes, I think one of the reasons why extremist Christianity succeeds is because more moderate Christians still assume that anything with Christianity in it is good. We attach an unmerited virtue to all manner of Christianity, whereas a lot of different versions of Christianity can contain some very hierarchical, patriarchal, and authoritarian biases that encourage people to yearn for authoritarian rule. Mr. Ed says, money is something I have little of, but if I was a man of money, a lot would be going to your cause. I don't have a cause, Mr. Ed, other than to side with America, to repel fascism, to shake off the contagious craziness of Trump love. Hey, look, I've got an explanation for you guys if you want to hear it, which is that I think I understand some of the process that is happening with Trump supporters. It's like they're in love. And I developed this theory because love is something that's often deemed to have an irrational effect on people. And from my own early dating experiences, I analyzed in myself that there was a susceptibility in me to like a man who saw me as I wanted to be seen. So when I didn't have a university degree yet, I fell for a man who could see perhaps that I hungered for validation and told me that hanging out with me was like intellectual truth on toast. And I'd never been romantically interested in him until he said that. And then I was like, we are for each other. He sees me. He thinks I'm insightful and I have something to contribute. And my brain just organized itself around that guiding principle at that point, that he had something I needed and presumably I had something he needed. And I built a reality around that, which other people wouldn't have agreed with if they knew what was going on. If they knew about the dynamics of that relationship, they would say, the dude is playing you like a fiddle, and it's not promising at all. There's no relationship there. And he's just enjoying winding you around his little finger because you're needy. And that neediness has made you vulnerable. And he has just managed to identify what you wanted to see, what you wanted other people to see in you. And with Trump supporters, they're new Confederates. They wanted to see someone with the vision to imagine a resurgence of the South. The South will rise again. Our cause of overthrowing civil rights progress is just. Our goal of restoring men being men and women being women and marriage being heterosexual, that restorative yearning and that rejection of modern society, which has embraced homosexual marriage to a large degree, etc. Parler's losing its servers on Sunday night, I think. Parler is not totally gone, but Parler will be gone Sunday night. Amazon is cutting its servers, and the CEO of Parler, who's John Matsey or something, has said that it will probably take at least a week to get Parler up and running again. And the thing is, if it's suspended for a week, that could well be the end of it. And also Apple Store and Google Store are no longer offering the app on their platforms. All right, Mr. Ed says that's a cause. And he asks for any suggestions on the best venue to use when Periscope ends. Yes, I will be using HAPS when Periscope ends. And I'm trying to transition to HAPS now, but I just miss my StreamYard functionality. And StreamYard doesn't work with HAPS, only with Periscope, Facebook, Twitch, etc. And I won't use Facebook because Mark Zuckerberg owns it, and I think he's very destructive to democracy, and that his arrogant ideology of Facebook is going to revolutionize the world and make the ideal of free speech more true, and that's going to make everything better, and just ignored all the evidence that he was selling out to Russian investors, selling out to the people he thought would have power, ingratiating himself to Trump and conservatives. And now that Joe Biden's won, Mark Zuckerberg has apparently hired more Democrat-leaning people. But I don't want anything to do with him, and I would rather get off all Zuckerberg-owned apps. Yes, that man said what I wanted to hear, because he, in his own way, was needy. His girlfriend had dumped him, and he was single and had a bruised ego. Look, bruised egos and people who don't know how to functionally soothe their own bruised ego go out into the world and cause trouble. So his bruised ego, he soothed by acquiring female targets and flattering them until they attach themselves to him. And I got to be one of those targets. I won't say it was a particularly fun experience, but it definitely, in retrospect, taught me some things about human psychology. So when I apply that to Trump supporters, what I mean is that Trump saw in them, they felt that Trump saw in them, because that boy I was entangled with didn't necessarily think I was intelligent. He saw that I had a need to be recognized as intelligent. And Trump understands that the people he represents have a need to see themselves as elite, as just as deserving as people who attend university. They're often likely to be wealthy. Trump wins with the over $100,000 income set easily. That's his most favored group, I think, in the 2020 election anyway. And they want to say, hey, even if I'm not earning my money by being a doctor, I'm earning my money through a business, and it's just as valid, and I've hauled myself up by my bootstraps. I'm a self-starter, and that should justify the fact that I claim there's no systematic harm that's been done to Black Americans. They just haven't hauled themselves up by their bootstraps, and they're constitutionally addicted to finding excuses. So that suspicion that modern culture and pop psychology is all geared towards finding excuses, that pairs very nicely with their innate susceptibility to racist explanations of entrenched poverty amongst some African Americans. And they don't look at actual factors like redlining, the denial of home loans, government-backed home loans to African Americans, regardless of their history of conscientious savings or conscientious work history, etc. Yes, state capitals this week are also at significant risk. Periscope is shutting down, which means all of the stars that people gave me, I'd be able to collect them if I had moved to America by the end of March. But we are moving to America by the end of April, so I may not be able to collect any of those accumulated stars. But I'm still very proud of it, and I'm grateful for the support that people gave me. And I think, in a way, paying stars, although I apologize that I cannot cash out the stars. You have to be a citizen or a resident of Uruguay, Paraguay, Mexico, Canada, or the United States, or Guyana, to collect your stars. And I was going to be a resident of the United States, but the time is just not going to work out. So my apologies to people about that. Have I identified my audio issues? Yes. If I let my daughter use my computer and unplug my microphone, then it has the laptop sometimes goes through some things in re-recognizing my microphone as something with function. Yes, Trump went into the bunker when there were protests in Lafayette Park, Black Lives Matter protests. He went into the bunker and he admitted going into the bunker, but he said he just went in to check it out very briefly, which is very typical for Trump to lie about something if he thinks it's going to make him look potentially weak. How many broadcasters live in my house? How many do you think? Yes, with a Biden presidency, administration, and a Democratic majority Senate, if it all works out, could very well begin to bring the heat to Facebook and other oligopolists. No, to apply to cash out your stars, you have to, I think, give your address and tax file numbers and things. No, I don't have thousands to collect. I have, I think, about $600 worth, because I have thousands of stars, but the stars are not worth thousands in and of themselves. Several broadcasters in the piano. Do you think I have 5? Do you think I have 5? What are we talking about with the 5 to 10,000? Oh, that's how many broadcasters live in my house. Okay. Hello, sunshine. I'm glad my YouTube notifications are working for you. That's nice. All right, back to the business of talking about the news, though. So let's see what else we have to report on. I would definitely give them away to a charity of my choice if I could. You have to be a resident for tax purposes, I think. So that video, I think, of that police officer screaming in pain while Trump people very evidently yell heave-ho, I can tell it's a big deal because, look, when something comes out that shows Trump supporters to themselves, if it shows them who they are and how terrible they are and what terrible people they're associated with by virtue of their shared loyalty to Trump, Fox will try and explain it away. They'll concede to some things, but then also put in a lot of language to minimize what has been seen. So they can say, oh, yep, I'm big enough to acknowledge that the Democrats have a point, but their point is just still stupid. So Judge Jeanine Pirro was on Fox and saying, oh, yes, about that riot. It's so terrible. She's like, it's making us look as bad as those dirty terrorists Antifa. So really opening strongly with condemning Antifa, which is largely an imaginary organization. Not that the people are imaginary. There's genuine people who classify themselves as Antifa. They're opposed to fascism and they believe in arming themselves against fascism and turning up to protect protesters sometimes against fascists. But fundamentally, it is not an organization. It does not have a head or officers or fundraisers, etc. Just people who wear black and are likely to oppose fascism and might even describe communism, not communism. They might describe communism as good, and they might describe capitalism as inherently fascist. So they're likely to be far left, but at the same time, their opposition to fascism is still a good part of them. Anyway, Trump supporters endlessly hear propaganda telling them that Antifa is on every street corner, ready to send the streets red with blood and to line everybody up against the wall and shoot them for being insufficiently communist. Yes, media moguls have been cultivating for probably 4 decades since Ronald Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine and made Rupert Murdoch an American citizen. He was originally an Australian citizen. Ronald Reagan fast-tracked his citizenship so that Rupert Murdoch could own a news station, and he owned Fox News, and he understands human psychology in a way that helps him cater to the worst impulses of human nature. Yay, sunshine's on Team Davcat. That's nice. Avery says hello. You live in Florida. Who paid for the dozens of buses to transport people to DC? So far, I've seen that Charlie Kirk has deleted an email he sent in which he'd proudly boasted of organising and paying for buses with his organisation called Turning Point. And Ginny Thomas apparently funded 70 buses, etc. Hi, Craig. Yes, Paul, that's a lovely idea if people feel like it. Oops. Parla may go offline. Yes. Why is David Duke in the news? Oh, there's also a baseball player called David Duke. Dear parents of David Duke, the college football player, what were you thinking? Yes, it's not a good name, but some people are historically ignorant. Chris Christie must have said something pro-impeachment. Let's have a look. Oh, we can have a video of it, 46 seconds. Yep, if incitement to insurrection isn't impeachable, I don't really know what is, because the Republicans' argument last time with failing to vote to convict Trump in the Senate was that the decision should be left to the voters. And of course, the voters, as per the Electoral College system, as well as through the popular vote, rejected Trump. But those who are arguing now that America needs to heal and not impeach are essentially sanctioning Trump's crimes and enabling him to commit further crimes and incite further violence and insurrection. So, yes, a collection of Republican AGs also helped fund the buses. Oh, you have a link to who paid for the rally periscopes, the rally permits. There's no video. Oh, yeah, no. Oh, there was no video just then. Okay, I will play the video. Sorry about that. It was only 46 seconds and it was good.
Trump right now, but if an impeachment resolution actually comes to the floor, won't many Republicans be hard-pressed to oppose it?
Yeah, listen, I think they're all going to have to vote their conscience and look at what happened. I mean, what we had was an incitement to riot at the United States Capitol. We had people killed. And to me, there's not a whole lot of question here. So, you know.
So you think it was an impeachable offense?
Before George. Oh, sure. Yeah. And
you'd vote to impeach.
I think that, you know, well, that's, if I think it's an impeachable offense, that's exactly what I would do, George. But I'm not in there. But you want my opinion? That's my opinion. I think if inciting to insurrection isn't, then I don't really know what is.
Trump right now, but if an impeachment resolution actually comes to the floor, won't many Republicans be hard-pressed to oppose it?
Yeah, listen, I think they're all going to have to vote their conscience and look at what happened. I mean, what we had was an incitement.
Okay. So Chris Christie thinks, yes, Rick Scott will support Trump. Look, I tend to not be surprised anymore when any of the Republicans continue to support Trump in his criminal activity. I think my last heartstring snapped when Senator Alexander of the Republicans voted to not hear witnesses in the Senate impeachment trial in late December, early January of 2020. I think my heart broke then, and my husband took me out for chocolate cake. And once your heart's been broken to that level, you don't go back to being hopeful very easily. hopeful of Republican goodness. But there are some. There's a Republican congressman in the House who's written an article. I think he's from Michigan, Peter Mayer, and he wrote that he was, in fear for his life, and that other Republicans have to recognize the gravity of what happened. Christie is relevant in that he was close to Trump. He helped him prepare for the presidential debate, the first one, which may feel like an eternity ago, but wasn't so long ago. And when people's allies turn on them, it's important and significant because the human brain pays attention to outliers, things that aren't normal, that aren't predictable. And people's friends and people's colleagues usually support them. When they don't, it is a sign that something is going wrong. Look, we're going to have to struggle with a lot of that because a lot of Trump people are going to try and seize this moment where we really need support for impeaching Trump to say, oh, look at me, I'm definitely condemning the riots. And it's like, well, are you going to take action about that? Kellyanne Conway is being very harsh on Twitter to the rioters, harsh for a complicit riot inciter who supported Trump and his lies for so long that America became post-truth and could replace Trump's spectacle for engagement with reality. So I'm not going to call out the people too heavily if they resign or denounce Trump. I'll point out it's not necessarily useful. If you resign, then you can't be part of a 25th Amendment push. Even a 25th Amendment push would only take Trump out of action as president for 4 days, because then it goes back to the president. And if they say, no, I'm not incapacitated, I'm fine, I'm not unconscious, I'm not sick, I'm fine, then they get their power back because the Constitution was written to heavily favor a president and their wishes to stay in power. This is a live stream, Pumpkin, but I'm not particularly interested in your comments, so that's why I'm not responding to them. Exactly. Any politician that wants Trump removed is relevant in this moment. And whilst Chris Christie isn't an active politician, he was a candidate, I think, for president previously, and he was close to Trump, and that's therefore relevant. Yes, Moscow Mitch is going to be the Senate Minority Leader. Of course, if Trump had succeeded with his insurrection efforts on the 6th of January, then it wouldn't matter. Mitch O'Connell wouldn't have to worry about being minority leader because American democracy wouldn't exist anymore. It would just be what Trump says goes, because his supporters would have used violence to seize power. And if he accepted that power and if the military supported him, then the rule of law is over and electoral processes are over. So maybe Mitch McConnell was just, happy to play both sides and hang out for it, but maybe secretly hoped that Trump would triumph and prevail with his efforts to overturn democracy. Yes. They're going to take some reputational damage when people learn more about what exactly it was that the GOP was enabling to stay in the Oval Office and how entrenched was his self-dealing at the expense of Americans. What's the news about Bernadette? That's great that you've told me you live in Voronezh, Russia, but I'm not interested in disclosing my location, and nor is it polite to ask on social media, because people dox people, and if they want to keep their information private, it's perfectly reasonable. Yes, lots of people should be indicted, and let's name some of them. Rudy Giuliani invited the Trump rally attendees to conduct a trial by combat. The speeches, didn't make a difference to the fact that paramilitary groups were already there, having organized to bring zip ties and prepared body armor to help preserve their chest in the event that they were shot in the chest, etc. Mo Brooks, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, Representative, is it Marjorie Brobert? One of the new, what are they called? One of the newly elected Republican Congress members was tweeting about Nancy Pelosi's location. So she tweeted, Nancy Pelosi is no longer in the chamber. Nancy Pelosi has been moved to another location. And in the morning, she tweeted 1776, i.e., just like the American Revolution, this is the Trump Revolution. And people who are watching this, yay, 1776. And also, don't look in here for Nancy Pelosi. Go find her and execute her somewhere else. I'm just eliminating one area for you. Yes, it would be great if Senator Schumer could let the Senate vote on impeachment soon. What do we need? 67 votes, but less if Republicans just don't turn up to the voting count in order to not go on the record as having voted for or against impeachment. I've got a full day of holidays to spend tomorrow with my children, so I had best go to sleep. Yes, Bobet the gun lady is not adorable to everyone. Nor is Rick Scott. True, he probably defrauded millions of dollars from the American public with various medical insurance scams. So I think for every Republican who comes forward and says, yes, it's impeachable behavior, they'll be greeted with a lot of people on Twitter saying, well, lordy me, you've suddenly found your conscience. It's like, no, these are all self-interested calculations. They haven't suddenly found a conscience. It's just with greater social opprobrium attached to supporting the rioters, the closer people come to a risk calculation line of saying, well, I might as well denounce Trump. So let's have a look. The poster about the march on Capitol Hill and all state capitals, the 17th of January, armed march on Capitol Hill and all state capitals. Over 200 years ago, blah, 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 demand freedom, end the corruption, stand up for liberty. So these are people who've really written their own story in which they play the hero, and election officials, the Supreme Court, judges everywhere, all Democrats are all seditious traitors who have stolen the election from that worthy gentleman, Donald Trump. And Representative Robert tweeted at 11:18 p.m. advising that the speaker had been removed from the chamber. So that could be evidence that she was complicit. If you've seen the video or heard the apology from a Republican representative called, I think was it from Virginia? Where's Oregon? Is there an Oregon and Virginia? Anyway, he has apologized now, but he videotaped himself going, yes, Dennis Evers is in the Capitol. Here we go. Trump is a totalitarian and authoritarian who wants to be king, which America doesn't need. True. But is America well organized enough to reject it? And it's to be hoped that people take the threats of violence seriously, because there are people who get a taste for violence, having incited it once. There are paramilitary people who yearn to fire a shot and to get involved in a skirmish. So some will see the death of Ashley Babbitt and be deterred from participating in a riot. But those paramilitary people with an appetite for playing as if they are in the military, they may be further spurred to repeat the violence of the Capitol riot. Mo Books told the crowd to buy a musket because he's insane. Yes, it's kind of collective insanity. My yawning is making you want to take a nap. There's lots of protection. We have all the news about this incident in Russia. I read that this attack was the first in 200 years. You can fool. Sorry, my Russian accent's terrible. I'm so glad for you having all the news in Russia. Yes, it was the first attack to breach Capitol Hill defenses since the 1814 incident in the War of 1812. Oh, I'll be so glad when inauguration is over, as if I can sleep then. Judd Legum is an independent journalist. He's very worthwhile following and donating to, because he calls corporations and asks them if they're going to continue donating to Republicans who have enabled Trump. And in this instance, he called corporations and asked them if they would consider not donating to politicians who supported Trump's insurrection efforts. So 3 major corporations said they'll stop donating to members of Congress who tried to overturn the election: Blue Cross Blue Shield, Marriott, and Commerce Bank. Which is nice, because in the last 3 cycles, Blue Cross Blue Shield had donated $949,000 to Republican candidates and $359,000 to Democratic candidates. Now, the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield says it will suspend contributions to those lawmakers who voted to undermine our democracy. Yep, Commerce Shield. So Judd Legum and his partner Tezeeks, they contacted overall 144 corporations that donated this cycle to senators who objected to the Electoral College vote. We asked if their support would continue. We got a lot of other responses and a lot of corporations who so far are ignoring us. So apparently what was really key in getting Amazon to stop hosting Parler on its servers was that engineers were threatening to quit. So when you get, not your typical lefty people, maybe more likely to be women, wine mums, etc., or young people who wear Che Guevara t-shirts and smoke marijuana. If your support for a contention is including more and more people, including engineers who work for Google, who work for Amazon, who work for Apple, saying, we don't want to have to tell our children that we worked for a company that enabled violent uprising in this way. Thank you. I'm glad it's a pleasure listening to me. That is my Patreon. No pressure, anybody, only if you feel like it. Thank you for the love, Lena. Yes, all the best. A lot of people want January the 20th to hurry up and get here. Yes. But in the interim, Democrats can potentially show strength by impeaching the unstable, totalitarian, despotic president if they can. They can do the impeachment in the House and send it to the Senate. Mitch McConnell is very opposed to it. And for the moment, he's still Senate Majority Leader and good at blocking things. So we'll see, because we can find out when Warnock and Ossoff are going to be confirmed and change the balance of power. But I guess it also needs Senator Kamala Harris voting on the side of the Democrats for it to be a definite majority and not just a stalemate. Yes, the election was an attempt to overthrow the will of the people, to throw out legitimate ballots from the Electoral College system, and do bad things. You've seen it all, Bob? Yes. That's right, Molly. That's right, Alan. All right, everybody, I'll say goodnight. Take care. Judd's the person whose article I'm recommending. He's got a newsletter. So you can become a Patreon, I think, for that newsletter. And that's really worthwhile. Does anybody remember when I was saying that you could donate to Fair Fight, Stacey Abrams' organization? She did a good job with Georgia. All the cool kids are doing it. Some of us are nerds, but are greatly appreciated by Dav. This is true. I do greatly appreciate you, Molly, and I'm so glad you get a kick out of being my Patreon. That's just lovely. And I'm so glad you told me that's how you feel as well. Thank you, Norma Jean. Always good to hear and see you, to see you as well. I will say hello to Mr. Dav. Bye-bye, Alan. Bye-bye, Molly. Nerds are the best, aren't they? Yes. Sheldon's enjoying HAPS. That's good. That's good encouragement for me to get back on it and try again tomorrow. Because that's where we've got to go. If you want to continue watching me, Periscope's closing on the 31st of April. 31st of March or something like that. It's going to be gone by the 1st of April. I can't nominate anybody else to collect my stars. Otherwise, it's kind of fraudulent, and we don't like fraud. We've seen some of the poor outcomes of fraud being involved in the electoral process. And I'm not talking about Trump's fabricated claims of electoral fraud. I'm talking about what Trump does in terms of defrauding the public and deceiving large swathes of the public. Okay. Yes, I'm yearning. I'll go red. Thank you, Bernadette. As always, Sheldon, thank you. I'm glad you love each other. I'll go rest. Take care, everybody. Take care, Molly, Andrea. See you, Alan and Sheldon and Bernadette and Bob and Jeff. Mr. Ed, if you're still there. Take care, everybody. And Cosmic Rose, enjoy your coffee. Take care, everyone. Bye. Night, Jeff.